In order to understand history of paper, we should first look at the history of writing. The tangible expression of a spoken language is writing. Humanity is estimated to have formed language around 35,000 BCE, as demonstrated by cave drawings from the Cro-Magnon man period that represent notions about everyday life. These drawings indicate a language because in some cases they appear to convey a tale rather than just depicting animals and humans. On the other hand, written language does not appear until around 3500 and 3000 BCE in Sumer, southern Mesopotamia. Cuneiform was a type of early writing that included drawing precise markings in wet clay using a reed instrument. The Egyptian writing system, known as hieroglyphs, was in existence before the beginning of the early dynastic period and is assumed to have originated from Mesopotamian cuneiform. The writing was independently invented of the Near East or Europe in Mesoamerican by the Maya around 250 CE, with some evidence pointing to a date as early as 500 BCE, and by the Chinese. The first writing instruments did not employ pigment to leave a living imprint on the surface. Instead, they were designed to be solid so that they could carve letters into a variety of materials. Chinese carvings, for example, were carved into turtle shells.
The Sumerians and Babylonians wrote on soft clay tablets with triangular styluses that were eventually baked. Romans used styluses to write on wax tablets, which allowed them to erase written material. Of course, these approaches had their drawbacks. Clay tablets were brittle and hefty. Wax pills did not withstand heat. As a result, individuals sought alternative options. They came in the form of pigment-based writing instruments. Egyptian scribes utilized reed pens, which were constructed from a single reed straw that had been chopped and molded into a tip. Papyrus was utilized as a writing surface with these pens. Reed pens did not last very long and were too stiff to use, so quills were employed instead. Quills are pens manufactured from giant birds' flying feathers. The ink is held in the hollow shaft of these feathers and it flows to the tip, which is carved into the shaft by capillary action. Quills were used to write on a variety of materials, such as parchment and vellum. Some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which date back to 100 BC, were inscribed using quills.
Humans had an urgent need to convey essential information in writing form to one another. The information needed to be stored, portable, lightweight, and durable media. Paper's creation allowed papyrus and parchment to be replaced with material that was easier to work with and less expensive thanks to the new manufacturing processes. It is interesting to note that the first definition of the paper provided by the Terracchiani's children encyclopedia in Italy is a material that is essential for spreading ideas in everyday life. Over the centuries, the paper has made an enormous contribution progress from enabling citizen participation in democratic life to rising levels of knowledge and education. The history of paper has mirrored the evolution of the human society over the centuries. From the dissemination of the scientific and philosophical knowledge to the spread of education right up to the creation of the political and historical consciousness, which gave the birth of the modern nation-state.
Cai Lun, a dignitary serving the imperial Chinese court, is credited with inventing paper around AD 105 when he began creating sheets of paper from pieces of old clothes, tree bark, and fishing nets. For many decades, the Chinese closely guarded the knowledge of paper production until Buddhist monk Tam Ching introduced it to Japan in the 6th century. The Japanese quickly learned papermaking skills and began producing this valuable material with pulp generated from mulberry bark.
In AD 751, when the Governor-General of the Caliphate of Baghdad seized two Chinese papermakers in Samarkand and established a paper mill with their assistance in the Uzbek city, the Arab world acquired the secrets of papermaking. Production extended to other Asian cities, especially Baghdad and Damascus, supported by the availability of hemp and linen, two high-quality raw materials ideal for manufacturing paper.
Paper did not arrive in Europe until the 11th century with the Arab invasion of Sicily and Spain. On the other hand, the paper was immediately regarded as a lower quality substance than parchment. to the point where Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II banned its use for official papers in 1221. In reality, insects found rice and starch to be an appealing food source. Therefore, sheets of paper did not survive long.
The paper producers of Fabriano, a tiny town in Marche region of Italy, are responsible for most of the history of paper. They began creating paper using linen and hemp in the 12th century. By using new equipment and the production techniques, these paper makers introduced important innovations. They mechanize rag grinding by using hydraulic hammer mills, significantly reducing the time it took up to produce the pulp. They started gluing sheets with gelatin and adhesive that insects didn't like. They created different paper types and formats. They invented watermarkings.
Watermarking is utilizing metal wires to add decorations to paper that become visible when held up to the light, allowing for insertion of trademarks, signatures, religious insignia, and other symbols.
Paper making began to expand to other European nations in the 14th century, and with the introduction of movable type printing towards the end of the 15th century, output indeed took off. Paper making came to the New World with the discovery of America and subsequent European colonization. Mark Kurlansky relates an interesting incident in his book called Paper, Paging Through History. When the North American colonies rebelled, they banned all British commodities except beautiful paper manufactured by London's paper mills.
Historical development of the paper-making process. The discovery of printing in the 1450s resulted in a massive increase in paper consumption. The paper-making process remained virtually unaltered throughout the 18th century. With linen and cotton rugs serving as the primary raw materials, paper mills were progressively hampered by shortages, to the point where they advertised and requested rags publicly in the 18th century. It was clear that a method for employing a more plentiful substance was required. Paper was created one sheet before the advent of the paper machine by dipping a frame or mold with a screen bottom into a vat of stock. The waiter was able to drain after lifting the mold, leaving the sheet on the screen. After that, the sheet was pressed and dried. A single sheet could only be as big as the frame and mold that a worker could lift from a vat of stock. Nicolas Louis Robert built a moving screen belt in 1798 in France to take a continuous flow of stock and send an unbroken sheet of wet paper to a pair of squeezing rolls. Robert's work was acknowledged by the French government, which granted him a patent.
And now we'll talk about the environmental impact of paper. Paper production consumes many natural resources. For example, 1 ton of paper requires between 2 and 2.5 tons of wood and 30 to 40 cubic meters of water. Furthermore, the industrial equipment employed in the different manufacturing processes requires energy and methane gas, as well as a variety of toxic chemical additives depending on the kind of paper. To lessen the environmental effect of paper manufacturing, it is critical to use sustainable or recycled paper whenever feasible. Sustainable paper is created from wood cellulose sourced from Forest Stewardship Council certified forests that meet stringent environmental, social, and economic guidelines. Recycled paper, on the other hand, is created from paper that has been reclaimed. However, because of the chlorine needed to bleach it and other chemical additions, recycled paper is not always as ecologically benign as it appears. So choose paper with the Ecolabel certification, a European ecological quality label provided to ecologically sustainable products to ensure you are getting an eco-friendly product.